I fucking hate audio. Makes no sense whatsoever.
It never does.
Nothing about it makes any sense. Like, all I had to do was restart the computer, and suddenly it was like, okay, I agree now.
Oh, I love you again. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Adcast, a podcast for the study of modern visual culture. I'm your transported into another world as a villainess of a popular ultimate game where all flags spell doom, Renu.
And I'm your hapless heroine, Soup.
This week, AD stands for another translocation, because this time we'll be talking about Villainess Isekai. But before we get into that, what have we been up to?
Well, haven't I been up to something fun? I have built a new computer, excitingly.
Very exciting.
Yeah, it's super exciting. I got all the bits and baubles, except for one piece of my computer that never arrived. That is just somewhere on the East Coast for some reason. It's completely inexplicable. But it was the power supply, which is very important because without one, you will not have power on your computer. So what I had to do was I literally just went and just drove somewhere to pick up one that I had to buy. And boy, let me tell you, that's kind of wild. But yeah. So it's a funny story, though, actually. When I went out... And this I suppose is connected to a different story. But I went to get this power supply, right, and I had to drive like 30 or so minutes to get to the store I needed to get to, and get the power supply because mine just never arrived, and I still need to claim that it has never arrived, basically, so that I don't get charged for it. But I drove to the store. And then I drove back. But on the way back, I was like, well, you know what? I can get some ramen on the way back. Like, I have not had ramen in, like, literal actual months. Right. So the very least that I can do is get some takeout right now, right?
Right.
So I did that. And strangely, I say strangely, because our car situation has changed slightly, there's sometimes like you don't really notice certain things that happen, and my phone has been notoriously bad lately about this is terrible. My phone is also like hard dying, and it's unfortunate.
What?
Yeah, I don't know. All my technology is just dying at the same time. But yeah, so my phone no longer tells me when it's low on battery until it's way too late, right? So before it would be like, okay, I have 15% battery left. Obviously, like you should plug me in now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it doesn't really do that anymore because I think it has lost the ability to accurately tell how much battery is left. So when it gets to around 25%, it won't really make any indication it's low battery. Normally it would say something like 15, but it will no longer make any indication that it's low on battery until, anywhere from 10 to 0%. Sometimes it won't even tell me; it'll just die, which is exciting. And then sometimes, because it's not sure, when I plug it in, the number of the amount of battery it has is actually different than what it was before I plugged it in. So it'd be like, hey, you should plug me in. I'm at 14% battery. I'm like, okay, cool. I should plug you in. I plug it in, and it says, by the way, I'm at 4% battery. And you're like, so you were lying to me. So that's interesting. But because of that, my phone died when I got to the ramen place. So one, I couldn't find the ramen place. And two, I was basically stranded because I don't know my way around here. So like I have to find my way home. And what I had to do is I had to walk to a gas station hoping that they would have one of those like portable chargers. They didn't. They had like the cable. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll buy the cable. And luckily, there was a big five across the street, which is for those of you that don't know what that is, it's like kind of this weird outdoors sports store that just sells miscellaneous stuff for being outside. Like they sell like fishing equipment and like BB guns and like swim trunks. It's very odd.
Okay.
But luckily, when I went in there, they had like portable chargers. At the very least, one that I was able to get enough charge off of that I could charge my phone at least a couple percentage. And so I did that. I plugged it in. I booted up my phone. I found the ramen place. I got some ramen, and then I went back home. I got home safely, and then I built my computer. But there was a moment there where I was like, "What do I do? I'm stuck here. Yeah. But luckily I got home and the ramen was good, so
Okay.
I suppose it sort of all worked out. Aside from that, like, not really much. Been around doing stuff.
Yeah.
Watching lots of Hollow Live.
Oh my god. Your obsession continues.
It is far too late for me. I don't know. God, I don't know. It's quite a bit. What have you been up to, Renu? What have you been up to?
I finally finished Okami. Can you believe
Oh
it?
my god, I cannot believe it. That's
After
amazing.
10 years. No. Oh my god, dude. I like when you finally get to the end of such a long saga and it ends in such a nice, satisfying way. Like I was crying for like 20 minutes. Like it was so well wrapped up, and the fact that the story was so nice and you remember all the characters that you met along the way and they kind of show them briefly at the end, and the way they recap all your adventures during the credits. Oh my god, I just got so overwhelmed with emotion.
That's very nice.
Yeah, it was really, really nice. It's definitely one of those games where you can tell that the creators didn't have to go as hard as they did, but they did out of a lot of love and passion, and that's exactly the kind of stuff, like, as an artist that I would want to be able to create and leave in this world,
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a lot of feels, and I'm really glad that I ended up playing it. I honestly wish I had been able to grow up with this game because it's just that good. Yeah, I think I would have loved it younger, and because I love it now too. So yeah, it was a really, really great, unique adventure. I highly recommend this game to anyone who just kind of wants an easy game to kind of just, kick back and enjoy. Really lighthearted, but really thoughtful story throughout. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Aside from that, by the time this episode comes out, I will have moved. So that's gonna be a thing. Yeah, we're already right now. We have mostly packed up. This weekend we will be moving the rest of our stuff with the help of some movers, and then we're out of here, dude.
Nice. Yeah, it's that season for moving. Everybody's moving.
It is.
Thinking about moving.
Yep. But I'm just glad we have a place that we like.
You're not gonna be roofless, yeah?
All right, exactly. I mean, I wasn't worried about being roofless, but I was worried about how many compromises we'd have to make in order to just, get a place. So, yeah, thankfully, even though we had to, like, really stay on it because properties would go out within 1 or 2 days of being listed.
Jesus.
Yeah, we managed to get one that we like. So
that's so wild. I cannot believe that, like, people are still, like, actively looking for new places to live right now.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Like, I think the reason why we got the one that we're moving into now is because A, we jumped on it so soon, and B, it's in an area that not a lot of people want to drive from into the city, because if you work in the city proper, like, uptown, downtown, whatever, you would have to drive like an hour from this place. But because my workplace is like kind of on the outskirts-ish of the city, it's not that bad for me.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that'll be a thing this weekend.
Nice.
Yep.
That's fun. And by fun, of course, I just mean like that sounds exhausting.
It is.
Having just moved myself, like
right.
That's
exactly.
It is, I will say, kind of nice. I think it's just like for my personality specifically that it's just kind of nice because it's very it's not often that I've moved, right? In kind of my life, because for most of my living memory I've lived in the same place. And the only kind of aside from that has been, my stint at college. And
right.
whenever I move, I get to kind of take all of the stuff that I have built up over the years that has like sentimental value, and then I'm just like, okay, now I feel comfortable saying I don't need this anymore. I can toss this. I can part ways with it, which has been very, very cathartic and nice. That's part of what is very enjoyable about having these like moving is like it's like a thing where you can have like a new start, right? So I'm happy about like the new PC too, because it's like, well,
oh yeah,
I can just like get rid of all the old junk on my computer and just transfer what I really need.
Yes.
Which I still need to get around to. I've been a little bit slacking on that, to be perfectly honest. But it's like the couple of days after you move is like exhausting, and then a couple of days after you like build a computer is exhausting. Oh my god, Renu, it's so tiring to build a computer.
It is. I agree.
do not envy anybody who has to do this for a living.
No.
Like I'm sure you get quite adept at it, but it took so long, and my hands hurt so much afterwards because I spent so much time screwing and unscrewing things in, and I did things in the wrong order, so I had to like undo them and then redo them.
Yeah. I felt like, I don't know, it just makes you feel dumb, or at least it made me feel very dumb trying to, hook everything together.
Yeah, it's a little bit like it's a lot. There's certainly a lot in the process. I like doing it because it's not something I like do super often anyway. But it's like kind of nice and relaxing. You just sit there and you're like building like this big jigsaw puzzle where if something breaks, you lose $600. Not anxiety inducing whatsoever. Like, obviously not. No way. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. And I've ever since I've had a computer that has been decently powered, I've built it myself. Which is only like technically 3 times now because I moved the bits from my computer into a new chassis a couple years ago. But before that, my computer like really realistically was about 6 years old when I switched over to this new one. And it's so funny. This thing could like bench press my old computer like nothing.
Nice. That's what we hope for.
That's what we like to see. That's what we like to see.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny because you just skip 6 generations of like of CPUs and like 3 or 4 generations of graphics cards, and you're like, this feels pretty good actually.
Right, exactly. I feel that.
It's nice.
Yeah.
And I'm very glad for various reasons because now I'm not gonna worry that my computer will explode every time I do anything, including audio editing.
Dude, it's like the possibilities just open up, and it's a whole new world.
For sure. Like if I wanted to, I could do all kinds of stuff with it. I mean, mostly I'm just going to use it for video games. It's not like
but
you need
now
a particularly...
you can play more games.
Right, I can play more games at higher fidelity, at higher frame
rates.
Which is shockingly nice. Very, very nice. But yeah, so that's exciting.
That is very cool.
Congratulations on having moved by the time this episode comes out.
Yeah, I'll have moved. You'll be hammering things out on your new PC. It's great, man.
Yeah.
Summer is full of changes.
Summer is full of change. That's normally what you're supposed to use spring for, but whatever. Summer is, I don't know. It's kind of mind-boggling to me that the year is like 2/3 done at this point. That's highly uncomfortable. But that might be because time isn't real and like everybody should still be inside because we still haven't done anything about the global pandemic crisis.
Yeah.
Ouch. God, it really feels like it has been like 2 weeks and also 6 years. Like I don't want to talk about the pandemic. Let's talk about
It'll
isekai.
Get better. Isekai, it'll get better in isekai too.
yeah. You know what? I wish I could escape to another world. My only concern was execution.
You'll have to get hit by an isekai truck.
Right. That would require getting hit by an isekai truck. That sounds very difficult. Yeah. So let's talk about Villainous Isekai. Which is funny because we haven't actually ever done an episode on isekai like as a whole sort of genre.
Correct.
But I feel like we've kind of talked about it plenty anyway over the past like year of podcasting. So piece together what my feelings are about isekai. It's not that hard. It has a lot to do with capitalism. So, as expected. But Villainous Isekai is a sort of breath of fresh air in the genre. And I was turned on to the genre a couple of months ago when some of my friends kind of fell into the hole too. And they were just like, "Oh yeah, you should read some of this." I was like, "Oh, I've read like some of these. I guess I should, pick up some other ones." And then I ended up just reading like all of them that existed.
Oh my god, dude.
I read so many of them also just like blend together. I don't remember like I'm gonna say like a solid like 60% of them. I just like could not recall like the difference between.
Oh, I'm sure. Like just going through what you recommended to me, I had to think about, okay, which of these ladies had a traumatic backstory, because I need to talk about some things about that regarding the podcast. Yeah. And then I had to go and skim through.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, because I just sent you the list, I also haven't touched these particular mangas in like probably like 2 or 3 months. So I'm just kind of operating off of what I remember, which I think, to be fair, there is some merit in that, where like you only really remember the important stuff, which I think, as long as we're not, and this is because we're not doing like just one show, right? If we were doing one show, I would like pick out all the little details and like talk about them and dissect them. But because we're not, like I would very much like to talk about all the kind of broader strokes, because like we're going to be talking about a ton of these like manga. We'll be going through them, and obviously like we'll talk about them on the way, what they entail, how you might know if you're interested in these, etc.
Yeah.
So what is Villainous Isekai? Villainous Isekai, isekai obviously is the genre of anime and manga and light novels, etc., where somebody is transported to another world, very, very often a fantasy world, like a medieval kind of fantasy world, and they have to really, it's kind of up to them what they do, right? Where some of them is it's like the you have the destiny of like you must defeat the demon king, and others are just like, what if I just live out a pastoral lifestyle? But Villainous Isekai is very specific, because it refers to a subgenre of isekai fiction about almost universally female protagonists, because the conceit is that the main character is reincarnated into the Villainous, which is an archetype that exists in otome games, which are dating simulator visual novel games aimed primarily towards like women audiences. And there's normally, generally speaking, there is a villainous character who puts the main character, like the actual heroine, through hardships. And this usually takes the form of like petty bullying, or in more serious cases, like they might actually try to like harm them in some actual capacity. And then the stereotypical kind of ending for that is that the heroine ends up with one of the fancy boys who really cares about her, and they denounce the Villainous at like a big party event, and she gets, exiled or executed or kind of whatever punishment the game wants to deal upon that character. And so the main character of this Villainous Isekai gets reincarnated into the Villainous, and they have to figure out how to not get exiled or executed, or otherwise have to live the most terrible existence of all time in this wonderful fantasy otome game. So
yeah,
that is the overview. Very broad strokes on that one, but normally they will follow that formula to more or less the T. And then kind of is up to them where they go from there. It can be comedic. It can be quite serious. Many times it's kind of played half for jokes.
Right.
Sometimes they do take it like seriously or sincerely, and I think that's very interesting. But yeah, let's talk about it. What was your experience like reading through these after having come off of HameFura, which we watched in the previous season, right?
Right.
Like, how did you feel, Renu?
How did I feel in my heart? So HameFura was a really nice, refreshing, fun watch. Kind of super refreshing in terms of general harem anime. It's not just a reverse harem. It's just, it's just a harem for this girl. And reading through all of these other Villainous Isekai gave me a much better idea as to, the whole genre.
Right.
And I'd say for the most part, it was really entertaining. It felt like a lot of trope subversion was happening. Mm-hmm. So it feels like people really go out of their way to be creative in this genre, right. this subgenre, I guess, of isekai.
Well,
so I liked that a lot. Mm-hmm.
Well, you make a very interesting point, which is that because the entire kind of conceit of all of these is set up to be a subversion of a very specific trope, it's funny that how all of the rest of it kind of becomes subversive in a lot of different ways. Like not even just like in the like, oh, isn't it kind of silly how an otome game works way? Like some of them take it quite at face value. But even then, like they're still subverting something, whether it be like traditional gender roles or like, how a game world is supposed to work, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like HameFura a lot, and I think it's a really great like introduction because it's very like low stakes, lighthearted. Even though it starts out with the conceit being like, oh no, I'm gonna get like exiled. But then like a couple, like 2 or 3, like 1, 2, 3 episodes in, you're just like, okay, all right, the stakes are not actually like that high.
Right, exactly.
Like they'll pull a little like every now and again. But it's like not actually the point of the story for it to be so high stakes. And actually, I find that a lot of them really aren't that high stakes, except for, and this is absolutely fascinating to me. The only ones that like take it super, super seriously are Korean webtoons.
Yes, the Korean!
Dude, Korean webtoons are fucking brutal.
They go hard, dude.
Yeah, like every single one I've read, except for the Beware the Villainous one, is like super, super like high stakes. Like I will actually die. I'm in real peril.
Yep.
Whereas a lot of the Japanese ones are very much like, we're moving in this direction, but for the most part, it's just like, I'm free from my marital obligations. I can do whatever the heck I want, which is kind of funny.
Mm-hmm. I think that says a lot about the attitudes of the two countries.
Yeah. I do think it's because, like, in a lot of ways, like, Korean media has a very specific bend to it, in many cases, where a lot of it is very much like Korea is known as the kind of place right now, at the very least, where a lot of revenge or hardcore movies come out. Mm-hmm. The kind of like landscape of media in Korea is very much like high stakes, vindictive, kind of like brutal, like I mean there is there's certainly something to be read about the kind of like knife edge that that a lot of it exists upon, whereas kind of a lot of Korean or a lot of Japanese fiction, especially in this space, in Villainous Isekai, is very similar to its like regular isekai counterpart, where they're a lot more about escapism. Where like even if you're subverting the escapism of isekai by saying like, well, now you're in kind of a pinch, right? Generally speaking, the goodness of the main character will carry them through to a place where they're not like where they essentially build up protections around themselves, right?
Right.
Whereas in kind of Korean webtoons, again, aside from Beware the Villainous, many of them are very much like one person versus the entire world. It's a very hostile attitude.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's certainly like definitely something I find interesting, especially when you consider how much of villainous isekai as a subgenre is centered around circumstance and like societal like shackles, right? Like you are defined in many ways because these are all like presumed to be like kind of feudal-esque societies, right?
Right.
A lot of them are very focused around the social structures and how those trap people, which can have like parallelisms to real life and how it works in real life. And especially the Korean ones are very, very adamant about this, where many of the characters who become the villainous characters are characters that have in their previous lives been very much trapped by their social circumstances in many ways because they are women. And it is very interesting to me because the genre is so focused around female characters, right? About like what does it mean to have agency in a space, especially one that is constricting you socially and one that you maybe don't even really understand and you didn't ask to be placed in.
There's definitely it feels like sometimes the stories almost are like a way for women to vent in terms of societal expectations and also the feeling that they'll never be as good as the girl over there, right? The heroine.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that is kind of the thing, though, right? Where a lot of these set up the because otome games have this dichotomy set up where you have two female characters who are tearing each other down all the time, or at the very least, one tearing another down and then one trying to escape that, right?
Yeah.
On the other hand, some villainous isekai subvert that. You know, things like HameFura do subvert that by saying, like, well, we're friends now. We can just be friends, right? And then others are they take a different route where the heroine is inhabited by somebody who is kind of the opposite. They feel like they are owed everything because they are the main character, right?
Right.
And there's obviously, you know, another interesting thing to kind of like, I'm going to put a pin in this one, right? But like something interesting about like the way that those characters are framed as like whether or not they work and are deserving of such a thing or whether they are entitled to it, right?
Sure.
Right. And because it flips the normal dynamic of what this is from like the stereotypical kind of view of what it is on its head, because the person who's the villainous usually has high social status. You know, they're engaged to like the main prince, so they obviously have a lot of like social power. And many of those feelings and actions are driven by jealousy or inadequacy or kind of all of those things. But it's interesting for media to be focused so much around taking this very common trope and then like completely flipping it on its head.
Yeah, it's really interesting as just an analysis on women in general, like at least the way that we societally construct them. And in your little fantasy isekai.
Right.
So it's a little more easily digestible, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah. Well, this is something that's kind of weird to me about villainous isekai, where there is a very complicated negotiation of societal power
Mm-hmm.
where, because your main character as the villainous, you you are positioned, right, as the audience, to sympathize with the villainess, and you're meant to kind of root for her.
Right.
But at the same time, the reason why that kind of villainous trope was so popular in the first place, as like something that was played straight, was because you essentially have somebody who is from the aristocracy, uh, wielding that aristocratic power over
Right. Mm-hmm.
commoners most normally,
Yeah.
because the main characters of these otome games are usually like people who go to fantasy magic school, but only go to fantasy magic school because they have innate magical talent and not because they're nobility, right? Normally it's reserved for nobility. So like,
Mm-hmm.
it is interesting to me that Villainous Isekai is trying to navigate this space where you are simultaneously having to reckon with the fact that your main character often has far more social power over another person who is, opposed to them, and at the same time is like not really supposed to like wield it vindictively, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me because it's almost like, in a weird way, and I think a lot of Japanese media is actually quite like this. Fire Emblem specifically is quite guilty of this, about like the noble divine right of kings, where like all you need to make your society better is to have like good leaders, to have like good monarchs or whatever. And obviously, if we kind of like take a step back outside of the frame of the fiction and we look at it, we're like, well, I mean, we probably shouldn't have monarchs at all, right? Like, if all it takes is for your society to be good is one good monarch, and then all it takes for your society to be really bad is one really bad monarch, and we've seen that kind of consistently throughout history, where like doesn't go so hot, and maybe there's a reason we don't have feudalism anymore. Right? But yeah, I always think that that's a very interesting thing, because at the same time, the main character is like has this same like the heroine of an otome game, because they are framed as the heroine of an otome game, are by the same kind of divine right marked as special, right? They have innate qualities that make them valuable to other people, innate qualities that kind of mark them as a good person, I suppose you could say.
Right. I mean,
yeah.
Right, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, it's kind of like, like how in like Harry Potter, like you never realize how British it is until you realize like, oh, this boy like just happens to grow up and learn that his family has like a shit ton of money and was super famous, right?
Right.
It's like, then you realize, wait, he didn't actually work for anything ever. Like, he just went to magic school because his parents were like wizards, right?
Right, but yeah, it's interesting because they make you sympathize with him by the fact that he had to live with the Dursleys for a long time,
right?
And
yeah,
you feel like he suffered for this gift, but it's true that he didn't really work for it. The work that he put in was surviving the Dursleys, essentially.
Yeah, and that's like kind of the exact framing that a lot of isekai stuff, a lot of villainous isekai kind of goes through, where it's like, the villainous is kind of owed the fruits of her labor because she puts in work, right? There is in a weird way kind of this like work ethic lauding that happens in a lot of regular isekai as well, where like the isekaiing is the reward for dying due to overwork or being stabbed by like somebody or whatever, right? But then you have like kind of more subversive ones where being isekai is kind of like a blessing in disguise, or is actively a punishment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a series like the saga of Tanya the Evil is supposed to be like a punishment for the main character, and it's kind of fun to watch what happens as a result of that, where you're like, well, I guess I'll just have to rebel against a god,
right?
But in Villainous Isekai, it's very much an approach where people are just like, well, the reward for your hard work in your previous life or whatever, right? Because most often they're like, the same kind of overworked protagonists, right? That like die of overwork or some other accident and then they get to live a fulfilling life, etc. Is they get transported here, but instead of a paradise, instead of like a divine like heaven for you, it's kind of like you're just tossed into more hardships, which maybe does say something about like the role of or like how women are treated, right? It's like you have to put in so much more work just to get more work put on you and like to be put in awkward social situations. Yeah. We talked a lot. I guess we didn't talk a ton about it during the wrap up, but like a show like HameFura takes kind of the lightest approach possible to the genre, right? It is very much like a well, if you're just nice to people, they'll be nice to you. Which I find a lot of value in that as like kind of a narrative device because, like I have expressed, I'm sure in the wrap up, right? Like instead of the kind of main mode of being, good at life is doing the violence and being strong, right? You get put places by being compassionate and forging relationships with people, and that's like a huge part of Villainous Isekai. It's navigating this social space, and it's forging relationships and making sure that you're kind of operating there. And it's like, again, I think a very like female coded kind of
right.
strength,
I was thinking the same thing. Yep.
Right, where it's like this difference between what society generally considers to be like soft skills, like communication and empathy.
Right.
And understanding and conversation, and hard, like quote unquote hard skills, like or like technical skills, like I don't know, doing sword fighting good, right?
Yeah, there is a lot of, especially in the beginning of HameFura, where she realizes if I'm not nice to these people, I'll die, and so that is a very that very heavily feels like a very female thing where it's like, oh, if I'm not nice to these people around me, that'll just hurt me in the long run or in the short run even. So in order to, fit in with society and societal expectations, I should be kind and sweet.
And I will say this about HameFura specifically. I do think it's very appealing to like have a character that is like such a hot mess that people love her for that and not like despite it. It's not like she ever has to go through an arc where she has to like actually learn how to be a lady or how to be better in the context of society. It's just that people kind of realize like, oh yeah, this is like charming to me. Like we're friends with you and we love you because of the way you are, not despite it.
Yeah, I think it could have very easily gone in the direction of, oh, she's two-faced. She only wants to be friends with these people so that, she doesn't reach her bad end. Like, it's just a survival thing. She doesn't actually care about them. But then you find out that she doesn't quite know what she's doing, and so there is a certain amount of like genuine honesty that comes from her that charms the people. It's not necessarily just her being nice to them, it's her being herself, and then they gravitate towards that. Yeah.
So yeah, I like HameFura a lot, and it's because it's like it's very funny. Obviously, like the humor in it is quite fun. Yes, I think like the thing about HameFura, right, is that it is very much like just one slice of Villainous Isekai. There's like a bunch of other I was gonna say shows, none of them have been animated yet, but like there's a bunch of other series that cover a lot of different themes in relation to Villainous Isekai, right? I made you read the Villainous anthology, Though I May Be a Villainess, I'll Show You I Can Obtain Happiness.
Yeah.
Which I to be perfectly honest, like because they're one shots, I like legitimately don't remember any of them.
It's hard for me to remember them. aside from like the really wacky ones, like
Right.
my favorite one and most memorable one was the one where she married the prime minister.
I don't even remember that one.
She basically, her punishment after her engagement was annulled was that she would have to marry the prime minister, and he's illustrated as this evil, ugly, bald, fat guy.
Oh, yes. I remember now.
Yeah. But then turns out she loves him, and they get along swimmingly, and then she gets revenge on her fiance and the heroine. Yeah.
I do think, and this is funny because this entire one is framed specifically around that pivotal moment where the relationship is annulled, right? The engagement is annulled, and I like that exploration of that aspect of the setting, and I like that they flesh it out a lot because it is. It presents a lot of very interesting things that one can play with, right? That some of the other ones on this list that we've kind of read through have picked up on. But there is always that, and this goes back to the kind of aristocratic structure, depending on how strictly people emulate that in their manga. Like, it would have been such a fiasco if all of a sudden your crown prince was like, I don't think I want to get married to this daughter of a powerful family. Right?
Yeah.
It would be such a shit show.
Especially so publicly.
Right, especially so publicly. Like, you would never do that unless you were straight up well, I mean, they're doing treason against the kingdom, right? So it's like, no way. Right, and there's a fairy tale aspect to that where it's like, oh yeah, of course the prince marrying a commoner, etc., etc., etc. But it's so funny to me. And I love the ones that explored in detail where it's like, you did what?
Where the king is really upset.
Right, he's like, you're going to regret that for the rest of your life. How could you do that?
Yeah, the prince is basically disowned by the end of it. It's like, it's wild.
It's a very funny reversal. But it's also interesting because if you're not exploring it from a kind of medieval power structure standpoint, you're looking at it from a relationship standpoint where either these women are genuinely bereaved, or maybe they were never into the marriage in the first place, or kind of any of this other kind of stuff where it's very much a case of women who have by circumstance either chosen to or choose to following this kind of singularity event where they have chosen to not be defined by their relationship to a man.
Right.
And I always think that that's kind of an interesting direction to move in.
Yeah.
And interestingly, a lot of other isekai take that route, a lot of villainous isekai take that route where they will run with post a lot of them actually happen post annulment, right? In a weird way, HameFura is kind of an anomaly in that respect, where most of these villainous isekai actually happen after the engagement has already been canceled and annulled.
Right.
But HameFura takes place before, and is about trying to avoid the flags that pop up.
Yeah. Though at one point she tells her fiance hey, you can cancel our engagement. It's cool, man.
Yeah, you don't have to do this anymore. We're fine.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, I always kind of like looking at that stuff to kind of see how people treat that.
Yes.
Generally speaking, it's interesting because it means that it opens up the characters to essentially define what is happiness for themselves and seek that. And interestingly, some of the manga that I've read that I don't think I've assigned you any of them except for I think for certain reasons the villainous noble lady will live her post-engagement annulment life freely. That is at least I think so. That is the only one I believe that maybe not even that one, but it's this kind of tendency for there are quite a couple tendency for Villainous Isekai to go in the direction of the independence is gained financially, which is always kind of interesting when the Isekai like suddenly brings in the capitalism again, right?
Yeah.
A lot of them are about I don't think it's funny when I say like I don't think I assigned you to read any of those.
Homework.
Right. But a lot of them are not like a lot of them focus more on, I guess, what some people might find interesting, but like the economic and political power following the post annulment, where generally speaking, the lady of the house or the villainess is put in charge of the household, like the entire like usually like she's like the daughter of a duke, right? So she's in charge of the duchy or whatever, and it's about basically being a rightful king, about being the like correct ruler and making choices that stem from that knowledge that they have in their previous life about how like economics work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in that way, those series are a lot closer to isekai shows, isekai like male dominated isekai, where like it's about recreating power structures that basically oppressed you in your previous life in your new one. Except what's interesting about that is that the framing is still very different, because where the framing of isekai in kind of male-dominant genres, it tends to be more about like the individual and their contributions. In Villainous Isekai, the framing is almost always more about how this will bring benefit to a lot of people, right? Yeah. It is the kind of platonic ideal of capitalism and economic progress where it will benefit everybody. And because it is a world of fiction, it does, right? We obviously don't see that happen in our society and in our real life, because we don't live in the platonic ideal of capitalism, or if we do, we live in the kind of late stage capitalism where like certain people have so many resources that they can do whatever they want, and that includes like unchecking all of the like power balances that have been put in place to prevent that power from coalescing. So that's always very interesting to me, but that's like a smaller subset than, no, I would say it's like probably like 40% of the Villainous Isekai, but many of the other ones are not necessarily about that. None of the ones I gave you are, I don't think.
No,
this one is about the plague or whatever, right? This is the one where she's the nurse.
Yeah. Though mentioning financial independence, the I'm a villainous daughter, so I'm going to keep the last boss, that was mentioned quite a bit in that one, where she talks about her business propositions and how her father how she owes her father money, essentially.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I really like that one. I'm a
was great.
Daughter, so I'm gonna keep the last boss. That was probably one of my favorites. It's
same.
Of probably I think my three favorites are Beware of the Villainous, I'm a Villainous Daughter, so I'm gonna keep the last boss, and obviously the Villainous' slow prison life began with a broken engagement.
Oh yeah, that's definitely up your alley.
Yeah, it's very much
as I was reading, I was like, this is a very Soupy story.
So like taking a little aside to talk about this, but like I really like the prison one, and I see that you wrote a note here where like you're really sad that there's no more manga for this because the art is so good. I completely agree. I loved the art style. It was so good.
It was great.
It was so good. I had to go out of my way to see if the person who drew the manga had written anything substantial. And the answer is no, which made me very sad.
Oh no.
But yeah, I love the art in that one, and that one is very very engaging. Even though it's only 3 chapters. Each chapter is like really long though. It's like 60 pages a chapter. That one outlines, which is funny because this one is actually not an isekai. By the kind of strictest definitions, it's not an isekai because she's not reincarnated. She's just like that, right?
Yeah. She was just born like basically being the bad lady in people's lives.
In a way, though, it follows the same conventions and is probably excusing the fact that it's not set up to be an isekai. It's probably one of the best examples of the genre, because it kind of encompasses a lot of what we've talked about, obviously. But it's also like that exact kind of like petty vengeance that is so satisfying, where you're like, you have a character who has obviously been like been bereaved, and then she's just like, well, I guess I'll just take off the training shackles, I'll take off the little kitty gloves, and you brought this upon yourself, and prepare to meet your end. And it's there's a very specific part of my brain that makes like very happy, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it definitely appeals. Like it's the penultimate catharticism of being the bad guy in the story. Is that as a good guy, you're expected to be above all that, to be above pettiness and revenge and all that.
Right.
But you end up rooting for the bad guy in this situation, because not only has she been wronged, but also it's just satisfying watching her get revenge on these supposed good people who aren't really that good.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that all she ultimately wants to do is to live a quiet life, but they're the ones constantly getting in her way. If they just left her alone, everything would be fine, but they don't, and so then they suffer for it.
I also, and this doesn't actually have to do that much with Villainess Isekai, but I love the way that this narrative is crafted, because it feels way more like a heist movie than it does anything else, in very interesting ways. Like, it shares kind of the DNA of like her plans have already kind of been set into motion since the beginning of
exactly.
Like, from before the first page like happens, like the gears have already started to turn, and it's just a matter of seeing everything kind of click into place. And that's very satisfying to watch, because you're like,
I love the way that they set up her sending down those supplies to the prison cell, like under the guise of it being used as storage space, but really it's to prepare for her being imprisoned after the engagement was annulled. And so then she could live comfortably. But then also the fact that they build up suspense even more after that by her family being completely terrified of the fact that she's finally acting as she is. You know, like they know what she's capable of, but no one else does. So it keeps the story going, which I love too.
I think like a lot of the reason that I like this one also stems from the fact that it's just like it's very much exactly the kind of fiction that I expect from a genre that is primarily revolving around I guess like how do I say this? It's like kind of filling in the blanks of a genre that did not do characters justice, right? And I've spoken about this before, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's a very like fan fiction-esque element to the way that it is that the way that this entire subgenre is constructed, where you take a character and you explore that character in more depth than the source material ever would have, been allowed to.
Right. The whole, I guess, conceit of it is that villainesses are often written off as just being evil ladies who try to tear the heroine down without any kind of like actual deep personal motivations. And so then this is all about exploring that.
But I also like it because like in many cases they're like victims of their circumstance. In many cases, like they're completely like in the right in many ways, or at the very least, like things are happening outside of their control, and like the way that it is manifesting is not good or healthy, but is a response to the stress that they are receiving. Both from a result of their like kind of social status and from their emotional relationships with other people, right? Obviously, like I don't, it would be great if we get like more more stories that are not about like women tearing each other down, but like you know this is an old trope. Like this trope is like 30 years old at this point, if not more, right? It's probably like 40, yeah, like 40, right? Because like Rose of Versailles came out in like 1980 or something.
Yeah.
But like that kind of stuff is so kind of ingrained that the original text in many ways has kind of been like lost. We don't really like. I'm sure someone knows, right? But I would not be able to point to like a specific kind of like shoujo manga or like otome game and be like, this is where like this kind of trope started, right?
Historians out there, help us.
Right. And it does like obviously it clicks a lot of like buttons in my head that is about like, you know, fan culture and about how people are concerned about giving interiority to characters that are otherwise like one note, right? I love that kind of framing, and I really wish for the life of me that I could remember what that anthology was that was about like shoujo, like villainesses, I guess you could say. About like, you know, the bully character or the character that like has their love interest stolen from them or whatever, right? Like that perspective is so interesting to me, and I really wish we got more of it, which is I think why I latched onto Villainous Isekai so hard, is because that was a genre I was so interested in. I obviously, like, you know me, I love like trope subversion. I love it so much, and I love trope subversion that gives like motivations and interiority and characterization to characters, and really grapples with the kind of consequences of what we would otherwise not think very much about, right? I love when something comes out and you're like, well, this makes me reassess kind of the foundations of my knowledge, right?
Right.
Like as much as like a show like, you know, My Hero Academia is very much like played straight shonen anime, right? And that has kind of its own appeal. To me, a show like Demon Slayer is a lot stronger because it completely challenges the assumption that like of what strength is for in the first place. It's not just like it's not just protecting people from bad people, but it's like making sure that you have the strength both physically and emotionally to like grant people like release from their suffering, right?
Right.
To say like, you know, this is mercy, but it's not non-violence, and that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
It really addresses something very fundamental about shonen battle manga and anime that something like My Hero Academia would never do.
Yeah, it definitely leans into exploring why we villainize people and also the complications of that, right?
Yeah. And obviously like in many cases, like it is not a great thing if your planned engagement between like two very important political figures is annulled, but kind of as a society we view it as not that. We kind of would rather play into the idea that love kind of wins over all, right? That's a very, very powerful cultural narrative that has existed in many like cultures worldwide, where you know, damned be the consequences. We'll find a way to make it work, and that is definitely compelling, certainly, right? But it's also interesting to see kind of the other end, where it's like, yeah, you did this and it's fine if you do that, but like you're really not thinking this through, and like maybe the relationship is even like ridiculously frivolous because like they're in high school, right? Like,
what do
really,
you mean?
They are in high school.
High schoolers
like,
save the world.
Right. The fate of the world and all that.
Yeah.
But you know, at the same time, like it's like, well, what, like the feelings of the other character, right, the other woman, the villainess, are by no right any less important or valid than those of the heroine. It's just that the narrative is framed in that way, so that's kind of what you end up believing.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about let's talk about Last Boss, right?
Okay.
Because I think Last Boss is like specifically a very, very good example of a villainous isekai. It's probably one of my favorites, and it really, really helps that it has an ending. Like,
oh my freaking god, it's finished.
it's done, and it's like satisfyingly done, and that's why it feels like, oh, I was legitimately like, is this like the only one that's done? Oh my god,
that's
dude.
what I was like while I was reading through this. I was like, oh my god, all of these unfinished works, I'm going to go crazy. And then this one actually had a really nice ending.
That is the great tragedy of trying to read serialized manga, is that like 90% of them are not completed, and the ones that are like, of the ones that are, like, maybe 10% of them have like satisfying endings, and the other 90% are like, oh. So it's like 1% of stories end well, and then like 99% of them do not.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm very appreciative of the fact that it has an ending, but I really like this one because it has that dichotomy between the reincarnated main character who becomes very invested in the world that she's living in, and the reincarnated heroine character who is essentially gaming the world for her own benefit, right? And this is kind of a big thing that pops up in a lot of different villainous isekai. You always have to wonder if it's gonna pop up, like when you see the heroine character, where you're like, but is she an isekai? Is she an isekai? Is she also an isekai? And in some cases the answer is yes. In Last Boss, the spoilers, I suppose, but like the heroine character of the otome game that she gets transported into is also an isekai person, but she's somebody who realizes that it is an isekai and will essentially game the world to her own benefit, and gets very frustrated when it doesn't work. And you know, in the way that I explained it, it's kind of like this idea of whether you're working for, you know, what you want, or whether you feel like you are entitled to it by the world.
Right. It's not that she isn't working for it. Like, both of these women are working to keep their respective, I don't know, roles, I guess. But one of them is being very manipulative and two-faced about it, and the other one is just doing her best.
Right. I mean, there is obviously that kind of like that setup where one form of work is kind of valorized and the other is not.
Right. I do on the mention of whether these women end up taking up their roles or not, or they kick it aside. This one is one where she very much wants to keep her role as a prominent noble woman. She doesn't want to become a commoner or anything like that, and she kind of thrives in this role, I'd say. She has a lot of financial resources. She has, you know, people around her who will support her, and she's also very smart, arguably smarter than the heroine.
Right.
And she uses that to battle against the heroine, who has so many good things that are basically handed to her, like the fact that she has a holy sword that can just kill demons or monsters, exactly. And all of the quote unquote capture targets are meant to just fall in love with her, like basically upon meeting her. Mm-hmm. And so she's like, well, so the Villainous decides that she's going to go for, I guess, the last one that she was meant to meet, the like, final boss. Yeah, the Demon King, because he is you cannot unlock him in the first route. And so she realized, oh, you have to complete the game and, you know, get hitched with one of the capture targets before you can even unlock him. So that means that he's completely unattainable by the heroine, so I gotta go for him.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think what's really interesting, though, is when you look at the arc of her character, and this is gonna sound terrible, but I cannot remember a single name in any of these because I just read them all at the same time, right? I'm so sorry. Like, but the reason like Last Boss is really great to me is because once the kind of arc of her character reaches its climax, there's this really, really great panel. It's like a great page or two near the very end of the manga where they're like in the final confrontation between the heroine and the villainess. And the thing that they do is they set up this like great double shot where they're talking about like how they view the world, where the villainess says, "This is my one and only life." Now.
I know what you're talking about. Yep.
and the heroine says like, this is like a game, like I'm supposed to win this game.
Yes.
Right. And it kind of like really, I thought that was like an amazing moment.
It was so good. Yes.
One, because like the art for like the paneling for it, the way the page is set up is so just gorgeous.
Very good.
Very good. Excellent dichotomy shot.
Yes. Yes.
Like this really great juxtaposition. And the other reason I like it is because it kind of speaks to the thematic ideas of the entire series, right? Of the entire manga, where from the outset, like, you know, she's trying obviously not to die, to get deaded, or become not a noble woman, because, like, you know, that's like a thing, right? But like she does live or she was transported to a game world, but at a certain point she realizes like that it is not, like, she shouldn't treat it that way, and that it is her life, because it is also the life of the person she essentially came to inhabit, and those people became one person. And I think there's something very interesting about this concept of reincarnation, but into an existing person, and what happens to that person when you get like isekai'd into them.
Yeah. I think
of them,
go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say many of them have this have a slight kind of tension where they're like, well, who am I really? Because like that's very fucking jarring, right? And at the same time, it's like, should I forsake the desires of what the, like, my host body, I guess you could say, wanted so badly, that she would, like, you know, do terrible things for something that obviously, like, you know, I know better, and this is also like my life. And it's very interesting to see this conclusion where she has not only become both people and like kind of grown as a result, but is also like, this is my life. Like, this isn't a game. Like, this is something that I choose to take seriously, and I choose to kind of invest myself in, even though like that was never asked of me, right? It kind of is an attitude that I think many people take when they like write these series.
Yeah, no, I think that's super interesting, is like you said, that dichotomy of
that
the
anatomy.
Where they both are women whose lives were cut short in their previous lives, and so realizing that, one of them decides, I'm going to use this as a second chance to get everything I want that I wasn't able to get in my previous life, and then the other takes it as a second chance to live her life to the fullest, because she was hospitalized for most of her life and she couldn't, you know, live like a normal human being. And I think I would say, like, in terms of the whole assuming the identity of your host body, so to speak, I think Beware of the Villainous actually explores that super well.
It does a super, super good job.
Yeah, she has a whole, like, freaking dream sequence where she talks to, you know, her host body's, you know, self, essentially. And they kind of come to an agreement that, you know, I lived my life the way that I wanted to, but this is your life now, and you should do what you want with it. I won't regret the fact that I loved this person while I was out there, but you're not me. you don't have to live that way.
Right.
Yeah. No. I I kind of wish more of the works explored that a bit more in terms of, if you're being isekai'd, what
happens to the person?
What happens? They just disappear.
Right. Well, it's interesting because there's lots of ways that they handle this. Because like sometimes it is another person gets like transported into an existing person and just completely overwrites their personality, right?
Yeah.
Like I think HameFura is a lot like that, and I think maybe the implication was just that like old Katarina just fucking died. Right? Like maybe she just died. That's a little dark, but like
because she got the head injury. Right.
She like cracked her head open.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, that got very, very dark very fast.
I think most works will kind of write it off as the fact that, you're being placed in a game, quote unquote, a game world.
Or it's just like the memories of another person kind of flood into you, and it's not necessarily
right.
And then you get into the conversation of like, like what is a person really? What is a person but a pile of memories in a meat sack? You were an ideological sausage.
If you receive another person's memories, do you become a different person?
Yeah,
or
yeah,
are you the
right?
same person?
That's kind of like something that I've always really liked about like quote unquote amnesia arcs or fiction, where like what happens to that person when you get all the memories back? And that's what that was one of my favorite things about Doctor Who when I watched like a lot of it, where I was very interested in the idea of like, well, I'm the same person, but I'm also becoming a different person. But me as the person that knows that I will become a different person, like I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to die. And you're like, damn, that's kind of dark. Like what? Right, because it's one of those things that does call into question, like, and this is why I love Nier Automata so much, right? It calls into question, like, what is a person if not just, like, not their lived experiences, right? Like, what kind of ephemeral thing do you have to grasp? Like, what is your soul composed of? Right? So, that is always something very interesting to me, but in regards to Last Boss, I also think it's really great because it so gradually builds up the relationship between the two main characters, and it goes in that kind of like they're bristly towards each other at the start, and then like they grow to like really care about each other, which I'm a sucker for.
Yeah,
I love that shit. And then just to make sure that I would fall in love with it, right? Just like you know what? 3 or 4 things that you like isn't enough. I'm gonna add one more on there. It's like when you're getting ice cream and you're like, I want some sprinkles, and the dude just like shoves his entire hand into the sprinkle box and is like, here's your sprinkles, and you're like, oh my god, I didn't ask for this many sprinkles. Right? Well, this never
overturns the bucket onto your ice cream cone.
You just dumps your ice cream into the box of sprinkles, hands it over. It's never happened to you? Okay. There is a very interesting moment of Last Boss that I very, 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 very much am in love with, which is how much do the game mechanics of the Otome world affect the world itself, and whether the narrative is willing to grapple with that or not. Because there is a lot of anxiety in the main character about whether or not the fact that the heroine is the heroine of the game will force the person that she's interested in, the like Demon King, to fall in love with her. And I love that setup. I love it so much. I love it with all my heart. I love the like fateful kind of like twisting. The like can you resist the like strings of fate, right? Is that a thing that you can do? Right? Yeah. That's one of my favorite narrative conventions. And because it's such good dramatic like dramatic tension where you're like, wait, I actually like don't know because like
Yeah, right.
I have no way of knowing, neither does the main character, and like we're kept in suspense about it. Like, what if it does happen? And you know, in the end, probably not, right? Where you're like you will overcome it with the force of your emotions, but you want to see that happen. You want that knife to be twisted a little bit before it does.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. They did a great job of building suspense around every turn, despite how capable the main character is. She's constantly kept on her toes because each new challenge just is more insurmountable than the last. Yeah.
Yeah, and I absolutely I love it. I love underdog stories too, and like Villainous just combines that with like all of these other interesting things that like my brain is like very, very intrigued by.
Right. I think I love it, and the fact that you know they set it up so well that you know as soon as the last boss transforms into a dragon, she's going to die. The Villainess is going to die. They hammer that home so many times throughout the story so that when he finally transforms, you're like, no!
You're like, no! Oh my god! It's happening!
Yeah, it's happening!
Also, that, the I promise that I won't, like, 100% spoil it, because I know it's, like, the first time we've mentioned it, but oh my god, the last chapter is so good. Like, the last two chapters are so good. Because everything makes sense within the narrative that has already been set up. It pays off in such a satisfying way to have an actual climactic moment that happens where, like, all of the drama comes to a head, and you're left wondering, like, for an actual moment, you're like, what is going to happen? Like, how is this gonna go? And when you see it happen, you're like, oh.
They just set it up so well, and you
absolutely.
can accept the conclusion because they had led you there naturally. It wasn't like a Deus Ex or anything like that.
Every part of it is like set up beforehand, and so when it comes back, and it's like not only set up, it's set up and expanded upon. So when it comes back, you can bring it back up to dramatic effect, and that's like part of what makes a really good story. Like many of the Villainous Isekais are quite lighthearted, really, at the end of the day, right? The stakes are pretty low. It's mostly about like, how does a capable woman get herself out of a fix, right?
Right.
And Last Boss does this in just like stunning fashion. It's so good, and the art is super cute too. I love the art style.
Absolutely, the art was so good, and the characters were written so well. They had so much personality and details to them. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's very rare that you find like such a shining gem of like just a well done manga that is done right. Because otherwise, like, there are good manga that end in about 14 or so chapters. This one I think is about like 12, 13 chapters. Many of the ones that I've read that are quite memorable tend to be in that range, because like they set out with a story that they wanted to write and complete. But then on the other end of the spectrum, you have like really great one shots, and then on the other end of the spectrum, you have shows that are so long that I could not reasonably, in good faith, recommend anybody like start reading them. Right? Like, I really like the Villainous Isekai. I think like the Duke's daughter wants to lead a normal life, or something like that. The title, all of these titles are super long because they're all based on light novels, and light novel titles, as we all know, are like longer than Fall Out Boy song titles. Like, it just is a thing that happens, right? But that one is like it's like 65 chapters, and I could not in good faith be like, Renu, I need you to read this for the podcast. Like, I would feel so bad about doing that. But that is like the prime one I would point to in terms of the kind of economic angle, if you're interested, obviously. So the last Japanese one that I wanted to talk about before we move on to Korean webtoons, because Korean webtoons is very different beastie.
That's true.
I want to talk about Lady Rose Wants to Be a Commoner, because it's not technically a villainous isekai.
I was gonna ask you about that.
if I'm being completely honest, it's not actually a villainous isekai.
Yeah.
It is an isekai, but it is about the heroine, but it is still subversive. So that's why I wanted to keep it on the list. Because it is about a heroine that is trying to escape the flags that keep popping up around her about the game events. Because she's like, I don't want to deal with this. I want to be in a bakery.
Yeah.
Which is very relatable, obviously.
Yeah.
But I love this one, and I want to talk about this one specifically for something that I've mentioned before. But I love the idea of the game world, the conceit of the game world, and the idea of that intertwining with inescapable fate. And I absolutely love the fact that it is just so desperately trying to get her to like be involved in the plot of the game, and she's just like, I don't want this, people will die.
They keep visiting her little house and her little bakery. And it's all these fancy princes and gentlemen, and she's like, no. And I do think it's interesting how she tries so very hard to avoid the game events, but the game world is kind of retroactively working around that. It's working around her working around the game. And so, yeah, no, it's really cool, and she solves most everything with bread so far, so I'm down.
Yes, yep. Yeah, you know what? Bread is the best solution. We've known that for years now. Bread solves all your problems.
We've been known. We were waiting for someone to preach the good word. Yeah, the only thing that I was kind of thrown off by in this story was that the tonal shifts are really bizarre.
Yes. No, I agree.
Yeah, I don't know how much of it you remember, but like, I don't know if you remember the chapter that she goes into that whole question answer thing with the long blonde haired guy.
Right. Yeah.
He's got the ponytail. He's like the merchant capture target or whatever, and it goes from like, you know, your usual villainous isekai affair to like kind of like hearkening to like Death Note mental manipulation, like I'm trying to game the system kind of. I was like, what is happening? I mean, this is really exciting, but like this is not in line at all with what's been going on.
I 100% agree with you. Because as much as I do love Lady Rose Wants to Be a Commodore, it is so funny to like be reading what is essentially like a kind of like pastoral slice of life. Like I just want to be a baker to escape my like responsibilities life.
Yeah.
And then every couple of chapters you're just introduced to, by the way, welcome to a life or death situation, not just for the main character, but for the entire kingdom. And you're like, what is happening?
What do you mean?
Why is happening?
And they also introduce like her backstory trauma like pretty heavy-handedly. Like they just jump right into it. So it goes from this pattern of like lighthearted bakery shenanigans to mental manipulation to more shenanigans to trauma. And I was like, good God, I need...
Yeah. It does not give you a lot of warning before it just kind of slams you over the head.
Kind of plops you into there.
The hard stuff.
Yeah. That being said, it was an interesting read. I think that one is definitely still ongoing.
Yes, yeah.
It's
one that I do recommend because I think it has one of the most interesting like protagonists of any of them because she has so much latent trauma and so many like kind of what you might consider like character flaws and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I do like the fact that when she is just cornered because she knows that she's not I guess like smart enough to outwit her opponent or whatever, she just breads them and then it's fine.
I mean, bread does solve most problems. That's been my experience, traditionally speaking.
Like she had to bread her little brother and that was
yeah, her yandere little brother.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I really liked her non-best friend. That was really cute.
Yeah.
Her only friend, rather.
Her only friend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is a very weird series. Like
it is.
It almost feels like it's not really certain about which direction it wants to go in, so it just kind of cycles violently back and forth.
that is exactly the feeling that I get, is that it's kind of meandering a bit because it wants to go forward in the story, but it doesn't quite know how.
Right. Yeah.
So there are these really dramatic set pieces that it's kind of just pushing together. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm very interested to see how that one turns out. So
yeah.
Let's talk about the Korean ones, because I shared with you 2 ones that are Korean. That whoo boy,
they're so different.
They're so
really
different. They're very different from the Japanese like Villainess Isekai, and very different from each other.
They're very different from each other.
I will say this: Beware of the Villainous is the anomaly. Like, it's the exception that proves the rule. Death is the only ending for the Villainous, is the one that like most of the Korean webtoons are like.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So, I suppose we should talk about Beware of the Villainous first. For no reason in particular, it's just first on the list.
Yeah.
How great is this? How great is this series?
I swear to you that this protagonist right here, this Villainous right here, is my favorite out of all of the ones in this
I 100%
list.
agree, and I 100% believe it.
Oh my god! Like, she's not only, because some of the at least in the anthology, you would come across a Villainous who wasn't really a Villainous, you know, like she was misunderstood, right? She wasn't actually doing bad things.
Right.
This Villainous, she definitely did bad things, does bad things, will probably continue doing bad things. Yeah. And she thrives in it, right? Like, she realizes the hand that she was dealt and decides, you know, that's the way it's gonna be. I have to grapple with how my host body acted in the past and kind of reconcile that with how I am and try and navigate the world from there. But at the same time, I will criticize my host body's actions because I completely disagree with a lot of her choices, and I want to make her valued. Is that she kind of comes from a really nice place where she felt like her host was like a doormat to the prince. And she can't stand for that. She wants her host to have like led a life of pride and dignity, becoming of her role in society of being a noble woman. But instead, she was reduced to like being like a bleeding, violent little lamb for the prince, and that's not okay.
Right.
So, the fact that she very, very quickly puts the prince in his place and then continues to do so for all the other captured targets, speaks her mind, and then does what she wants, and then but also admittedly she tells, like, or she as you go through her thought process, she knows that she's not very smart in relation to, you know, maybe the people around her, but she also knows that morally she's right, because everyone else here is they're all bad.
They're all garbage people. It's so good.
Yeah. Except for the heroine, whom she knows is like a perfect angel. Everyone else is garbage. And so she tries to keep everyone away from the heroine.
And I love that even the like heroine is just like, I don't really want to be here.
Yeah.
I absolutely love Beware of the Villainous because it is by far the one that has like the most chaotic energy. And
yes.
It is one of the most cathartic ones because it has a very similar tone to the prison one, except in a different way, where like the prison one is about this like kind of slow lazy unfolding plan that will eventually destroy everybody involved in shaming her. And Beware of the Villainous is, this sucks, I'm gonna wreck it. And she spends the entire series wrecking things. And it's
so great.
So good and so satisfying to just see her not accept any shit whatsoever.
I'm really curious about how they'll go from here, because I noticed that there isn't a whole lot of characterization for the capture targets yet, and so I'm interested in seeing how the author will treat that, because we get a lot of great characterization for the Villainess, for the heroine, and for Werewolf Boy,
right?
Her servant, and I want to kind of see that for the capture targets too, because so far a lot of their thoughts and motivations have been not really spoken. It's just kind of assumed by the villainess that this guy is a playboy. He was just trying to get back at me. For some reason, he doesn't want to annul our engagement, but I'm going to try my darndest to make sure that it happens. And the same goes for like all the other capture targets too, where they each have. We're only seeing it from her point of view, so we don't actually know what the truth is.
Right.
Yeah. So
this also reminds me. This is probably by far the prettiest one to look at.
Oh, it's great. It's in full color.
Oh, I love this about Korean webtoons. They're always in full color.
Oh my gosh.
And
that's work.
It is a lot of work for sure. But like, holy crap! The art is so good, and
it's really good.
It's super unique too. Like I can't think of anything else that looks like this, and it's not like it's like photorealistic or anything. It has just such a sharp, like clean style to it. Like the shading is so like nice and sharp, and like the character designs are like really appealing to look at. I love the main character.
Yeah. What I noticed reading it and analyzing the artwork, because I was so impressed by it, was where the author saved time, because there's absolutely no way that you would be able to hand draw all of this and maintain your sanity and keep up with weekly or however, I don't know how often they publish, but like, you know, webtoons have deadlines, you know, that you have to meet. And so the way I noticed, or what I noticed about it, is that the artist is super smart about where they essentially quote unquote take shortcuts, right? They save time for themselves, where they do use 3D CG assets, right? But they they composite them so well that you really don't notice them, or they're so far pushed into the background that it's so you're scrolling through as like you do with a webtoon, that you wouldn't really notice it if you're just scrolling through. Right, it's like a background shot of like a building or something, or of a carriage, where you kind of know that it's CG, but only because it looks a little too perfect, right? Yeah, right. Yeah. Otherwise, like, if it had a couple like imperfections here and there, I would have assumed that they drew most of it, right? And it's the same with some of the clothing designs, like the bows or the prince's the front of his I want to say his shirt or his jacket or something, that really formal looking coat. Yeah, the trimmings on that are also, I want to say, either like a pattern that the author drew and copied, or were also like a part of a CG asset. But either way, like, it's really, really well done. Like, you barely notice it. Like, you would only notice it if you were looking for it. And I was looking for it because I just wanted to make sure that this person wasn't like an actual like artist god. And they were a human being like me, you know?
Just like has 8 hands, all of which to do art with.
Yeah, exactly. Because there are artists out there that are that crazy, like the artist for Bride Story, who hand draws all of these really, really intricate historical patterns for clothing for every panel in the entire
I know. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's actually like wild.
Yeah, and I don't. I appreciate that people out there like that exist, but I need to like.
You need to know there are normal people out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I completely get that. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, the art is fantastic. I loved it.
I mean, to be fair, it plays a lot on. I think there are many faces that are like very very clearly like traced, but because they're meme faces. Yeah. And they're incorporated so well.
I was not expecting so many pop culture references and internet references. Like, it really threw me.
and it is simultaneously both legitimately like quite compelling to read, because it has its moments where it's like, you know, addressing the material seriously, and then many others where it's just so funny. You're just like,
so funny.
Like, you just see a face that like, God, like, you know the face that her dad makes? The one where he's just like, it's so funny. I like cracked up for like 5 minutes after reading it because I was like, I can't. This is too much.
Every time she whips around with her exasperated like face
Just,
of like like the wrinkles on her face just droop, and it's just so funny.
It is. It's such a good like modern comic, right?
Yeah.
Every aspect of it is like could only have possibly been made like now, right?
Right.
And it feels very, very like new, and at the same time, the impact of it is so good because it's incorporated so well. It's not just like one-offs or whatever. Kind of every layer of it is like, many of the gags are like, you know, like these like really detailed, like traced like reaction shots, but they're always spot on, and they're always so funny, and they always complement the like pacing of the comic so well, right?
Yes.
Every aspect of it is just done incredibly.
It never feels forced, like they're trying to like kind of like ham-fist this joke in because they knew that it would be funny. It's just so appropriate for that moment. Like, this meme face is exactly how I would feel in this situation, and it's perfect.
Well, and this is like a little bit outside the scope of like really the kind of discussion of Villainess Isekai, but as a comic, it's very well put together, right?
Yeah.
As a piece of visual media, it feels way more like somebody fluent in memes, right?
Yeah.
Than somebody who has seen a meme. Right, like you can kind of tell when like when like a manga puts in like a one-off like Salt Bay reference, you're like, aha, it's the Salt Bay, right?
Right.
And then it's another thing entirely when they're incorporated naturally, like naturalistically into your story in a way where they become part of the visual language of the comic itself, and that actually is very impressive and something that I really don't see a lot of outside of what was that manga called? It was like Tokyo ESP or something. But like, one of the characters' dads is just Leonidas from the 300 movie, and then another character is just Yoda from the Star Wars movie, but they're like important characters and nobody addresses it. And that creates this like hilarious, dissonant kind of absurdist humor, which I really appreciated. But like, I struggle very much to think of another comic that incorporates memes so well while like making sure that they're not going to become instantly dated, because that is like the real problem with memes, right? Where if you're not careful with how you use them, you come across as somebody who is very out of the loop or is very old. And so it is very impressive to have a comic that is very hip with the kids, as they say. It just like feels like somebody's fluent in how memes are actually used in real life.
Right, it's I feel like this author has such a good grasp on meme language and using it as a language that they probably socialize very normally with memes, but in such a way that's communicable even to someone who maybe hasn't necessarily seen the meme or knows what they're talking about. They'll be able to read this webtoon and they'll still be able to enjoy it, even if it's for the fact that the face is really funny, but the face is also very appropriate for the thing that's happening in it, and it works regardless.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about Death is the Only Ending for the Villainous, which is the last one that I asked you to read. Speaking of tonal whiplash, this is by far the darkest one that I asked you to read. There are darker ones out there, but I did not ask you to read them. But all the darkest ones are always Korean webtoons. Korean webtoons pull so few and I think it's because it's a result of the fact that they are products of and for the internet. Whereas manga in most large respect is still kind of a print medium, right? Where like they kind of expect you to buy it. Whereas webtoons can kind of get around a lot of restrictions that manga does. You know, manga having to go through traditional publishing, and webtoons not really, right?
Right.
And moreover, it's like webtoons for the most part don't really have the same fear of and this is an entire discussion about webtoons versus manga, right? About like Korean like Korean webtoons. But webtoons I find don't have the same sense of urgency, or I wouldn't even say urgency. They don't have the same sense of anxiety that serialized manga does, where serialized manga always feels like knife edge, like this could end at any moment and it would be very unsatisfying. Webtoons kind of go at their own pace because it's a weekly, or usually every 2 weeks or every week or so strip, and it doesn't feel like the authors are under the same anxiety surrounding getting canceled that regular kind of Japanese mangaka are, because the only real it feels like the only real like way to not do the webtoon anymore is if you just stop making it, if you can't like fit that part of if you can't fit it into your life anymore, if you can't produce it anymore, right? And this kind of sometimes leads to things like Tower of God, where it takes like 800 chapters to get invested in anything, but is like quite good once you do. And then other things like Beware the Villainous, which just feels like it's just so irreverent for anything, and it like takes no prisoners, and it's so fun. But then there's stuff like Death is the Only Ending for the Villainous, which is like a very dark take on what is like landscape wise a very usually quite soft subgenre.
I remembered while reading this, the moments that I laughed really surprised me. I was like, oh, I laughed, I got a chuckle out of that.
Right. Yeah. And it is I think because this webtoon is quite good, Death is the Only Ending is quite good for like traditional ideas of how to build tension, which is that you build tension and then you relieve it for a little bit, and then you build it up again so that you can really, and it's like this like cycle. It's like the cycle of horror, right? Because it is quite a scary manga, or a webtoon, I should say. In the respects of the stakes actually are quite meaningful, because she will die actually if things go wrong. And you know that she won't, because then the series will end, but the tension is still built in such a proficient way that you still feel it, right?
Yeah.
You feel the dread that she feels, and when something kind of funny happens, it like you get to relieve the tension a little bit, right? And that's the way that you're able to continue to have this much tension. Because if you just are high tension all the time, it becomes meaningless, right? It is the kind of ebb and flow of tension that makes it meaningful, right? That is why a roller coaster does not just have like 8 drops in a row. It's like it has like a drop, and then like some loop-de-loops, and then like a straight bit, and then it drops again, right?
Yeah. I think my favorite, I guess, like chapter or arc or whatever that's occurred so far is when she meets the prince, I guess, the blonde-haired guy.
Right.
You get introduced to the fact that she has to go to this ball. She doesn't want to go, but then she has this nice heart-to-heart with her brother. They ride there together, and then the prince shows up, and he is all violence, and she's already been dreading this encounter, but she wants to meet him because she wants to test out the game mechanics and see if there's a reset button like there is in her game.
Right.
And when she encounters him, she is just about ready to die, but then she panics because there's no reset button that's popping up for her. And I love that tension of, is she going to go through with it and really commit and test and to see whether she'll die and wake up in her, in her previous body, in the real
like
world.
ReZero style.
Right. Or will she just die here and that'll be the end of her?
Will she just die in real life?
Yeah. And I love that she just has this complete freak out and then just aborts out of it completely. And is just like, I can't risk it. Like, this is my life, And then after that's all resolved, they have like the tension lifting moment of her meeting the other capture target, the silver haired guy after that.
Right.
So I think the way that they play with this kind of, like you said, the traditional like easing of tension and then building it up again is quite good in this one. Like clearly the author kind of knows what they're what they're doing
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah. I think in regards to like its kind of place in like a lineage of like villainous isekai, this webtoon is very interesting because it's so dark about what its premise is.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's very, very, very clear about what that like situation, like what the situation, the conceit of the webtoon means for the main character and why it means something for the main character, right?
Yeah.
This is obviously something that I kind of like alluded to earlier, but like the idea of this world that you're transported to where you are bound by like social convention and your options are so limited, and many of them will end up with you getting into like serious trouble or like even like actual peril, right? Like we don't really have to imagine a world like that. That's just what it's like to be a woman. So like it works really well because it takes the core kind of conceit of like the villainous isekai, and it very explicitly looks at it from the lens of, you know, what does it mean to come from a society where, and this is especially true of and this might be part of why like this is such a prominent thing in Korean like webtoons, but like Korea is such a like a highly patriarchal society. It is intensely misogynistic and terrible for women, right? And many of this kind of comes from this like conservative worship of Confucianism, right? Obviously, you know, kind of like China in that same respect, where like women don't have a lot of options. In fact, you could almost say that in a game-like sense, they have very limited options, and if you choose the wrong one, it will not end very well for you, right? So that kind of dread is not only like a tension and a dread that builds naturally in the story, but is also kind of borrowing from like a real life kind of sense of dread, right?
Oh yeah.
And not like maybe like I honestly I think it's like somewhat intentional, right? Because like they spend so much time like discussing the main character's backstory, right? Or like alluding to it at the very least, and you kind of get why all of these choices are so anxiety inducing, because one of them is just being silent. You just have to shut up and take it. And sometimes that's not even the right choice, right? It's like
sometimes it's groveling, and groveling's not the right choice.
Right. And like the world tells you that you have to respond in a certain way, and when you do, it punishes you.
Yes.
So,
which is why I do like that. Eventually, she just decides to turn off the choices and go about it her own way, and it works out for her. But the tension is still there because even though, like game mechanic wise, she can see how much they like her. In terms of favorability percentage, like their percentage goes up the more that she says something that they like. She still runs this risk of she's playing the game in quote unquote hard mode, and so if she makes one single slip up, their favorability will drop instantly and she'll reach a bad ending and they'll kill her essentially.
Right.
So I do think that that's a really great ongoing tension mechanic within this story, is that it doesn't matter how comfortable you get with them, like slowly increasing favorability with her. It's just it just takes one slip up, you know, and then and it's over for her. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that they show her deaths, I think is also really poignant.
Yeah. I mean, I think also like that kind of feeds into the same thing though, right? Where it's like it is very, very easy for it's very easy for you to say one wrong thing and suddenly, you know, a man hates you.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, that's not a game, that's real life. That's realistic. But yeah, you know, like I think that this I like and the reason I recommended this to you above all of the other, even the darker ones, right? Because I wanted to recommend that you read one of these like dark webtoons in addition to Beware of the Villainous, right? Because they're so drastically different.
Yeah.
But the reason I wanted you to read this one is because it is probably the most explicit and touches the most on why the themes of villainous isekai as a genre are interesting, right? This idea of being placed into a situation in which you have to, make the right choices to survive. It's very different from HameFura, which is like, if you're just nice to people, like, you can use compassion and empathy to solve problems, right? And this kind of is the opposite, where it's like, compassion and empathy will get you nowhere if people around you are not willing to accept it, which, yeah. That's something in it. So, I very much like appreciate this as kind of one of the things that we're looking at in that regard.
No, it was a very interesting read. It's still ongoing, like a lot of these. I'm looking forward to seeing it update. I checked, like, I think just the other day to see if it updated, because I've been keeping up with them.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that's I don't know. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about?
I think that's mostly it. There was one that I wanted to mention. The for certain reasons, the villainous noble lady will live her post-engagement annulment life freely. The one that's about her being a nurse.
Yeah.
It like. I thought that I would like this one because it appeals to like my medical sensibilities.
Right.
But then they just magic it away, Soupy.
I mean, there are other ones where she actually does doctoring stuff. Not in this one, but other manga.
Okay. Okay.
But you just want Doctor Isekai.
Yeah, essentially, right?
There's 100% Doctor Isekai. I promise. I bet there's so many Doctor Isekai.
I'm sure there are. That's what I want.
Yeah.
There will be something very cathartic for me in that. Someone using very modern medicinal sensibilities to treat past diseases where the technology doesn't exist yet, and they cannot use modern technology to do so. Like, she knows that bacterial infections are causing such and such disease, but she doesn't know how to treat it, and so she reaches in with her magic and pulls it out of them. I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah. That's certainly a thing.
I do like that they promoted hand washing and wearing masks. It's almost like this piece of work, which was written before certain things, new things though. Yeah. That's all. Otherwise, this was really fun. I liked reading all of these. It was kind of a whirlwind, but it was fun.
So yeah. No, I completely agree. Like, this is part of why I wanted to switch to like a monthly schedule, because like it gives us a lot more time to explore more things than like a 2-week kind of turnaround would. Because like a 2-week turnaround just means we have 1 week to do things and then 1 week to edit, which is not very much time to do any research whatsoever. So thank you for joining us on this adventure through the Isekai. It is we're just barely scratching the surface of a sampling. I'll obviously leave links to all of the stuff that we read. Especially the stuff that we really liked. So obviously we'll be sure to put those links in, and then maybe in some time we'll see something new crop up, something new interesting in the kind of villainous isekai genre. I don't know. I very much enjoyed getting to talk about isekai with you, Renu, as always.
I hope that they make more villainous isekai anime, because the only one I've seen was HameFura. I don't know if they've made more.
I don't think they've made any anime yet. Obviously, anime production right now is a little bit up in the air anyway.
But I'm hoping if HameFura's anime was successful, that maybe they'll make more of other series. Because that would be really cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's certainly a thing. So I really hope so. I really hope especially we get an anime for Last Boss, because
oh my god,
that'd be so delicious. That'd be so
it
good.
would be so good.
Wow, tasty.
It's so anime already.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
As we talk about Villainess Isekai. It was, a super, super fun time. I'm sorry that this episode came out a little bit late. The research took a little bit longer than we expected. Well, life is a little turbulent right now anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, the next episode should be up by the end of the month, though. It is scheduled to be up then.
Maybe.
I hope it is still up then. There's a siren going off in the background. I hope that doesn't pick up on the microphone. What the hell are people doing? It's like 10 p.m. on like a Thursday. Who's getting turned at 10 p.m. on a Thursday? It might have been an ambulance, actually.
Oh.
But anyway, why don't we wrap up?
Yeah.
So, who are you? Where can we find you on the internet?
Who am I? I am Renu. You can find me on the internet at Swandron on Twitter and Twitch and Tumblr and Facebook and all that. You can find me on Instagram at swan.drawn. I finished Okami, like I said at the beginning, so
Very nice.
After I get settled into my new place, I think I'll probably pick up playing Judgment again, because I never finished it.
Judgment.
And then
I completely forgot that game existed.
I know. I have to finish it so I can tell you what my judge eyes see in that game.
I see.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I'll be up to. Hopefully can do some artwork and whatnot as soon as I get settled. Yeah. How about you?
Well, you can find me all the places at Literal Soup. Now that I have a new computer, I am looking to maybe start like streaming once or twice a week. And
oh my god!
Maybe do that. I have some ideas about what I want to do. Renu, you and I could play some games together.
Oh my god!
I wanted to play through an RPG game, like maybe like Outer Worlds or like Fallout or something. But specifically as my current D&D character, whose name is simply Ulf.
Oh.
So, yeah, I think that would be super fun. I would look to doing that. Obviously, I promised my friend I would stream Dark Souls 2 since I never finished it, and I promised that I would at one point, and I have yet to, so I feel kind of bad. But yeah, so be on the lookout for that. Twitch.tv/LiteralSoup, as with kind of everything else, and my presence on the internet. I'm still working on stuff that might be interesting that will go up on my WordPress, literalsoup.wordpress.com. Stuff for the Patreon. I hope I get that stuff done. I've been a little bit slacking on it, but I've also kind of been like moving and doing all kinds of stuff. But hopefully that'll go up at some point, because it is all stuff that I am interested in, obviously.
Yay!
So
good.
Yeah. Our opening is by Scotchy Network, and our ending is by Takuma Okada. And the patrons we are thanking this episode are Evan, Frostfall, Cheru, Sean, Gwen, Claire, Figure 4, and Magpie Mirror Test. Thank you so much for
wow, thank you.
We really appreciate you. I'm working off of the list from July still, because technically this episode was OTU at the end of July. But the next episode will probably come out at the end of the month. I fingers crossed. I hope to Jesus. Like, we will do our very best. I will not spoil what it is about, because I promise you it will be it's gonna be an adventure. I cannot wait. I'm so excited. Honestly, you have no idea.
Just so you guys are aware, Soupy has been waiting like a year to record this. I
literally had to wait a year because I missed the timing last year. Because it popped in my brain and I was like, oh no, it's not quite right. But I promise you, it's coming.
Yeah, it's coming.
All right, well, that has been us. That has been the cast. We will see you next time.
See you next time.
なら、また明日ね。